Hi, Chava. Good morning. Good morning. I'm sorry about the coffee situation. All right, lefum tzara agra. Right, will just be extra schar this morning. So also we begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank Yona Shushie Ehrenfeld for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of Yona's grandfather Yosef and Shmuel Aron. Marc Karstaedt, our Talmud Torah sponsor, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of his mother Chana Bat Shraggai. And our Week of Learning sponsor, Leah Sol, in memory of her mother, Marguerite Streit, in commemoration of her 9th yard site. We also thank our Day of Learning sponsor, Naor and Chani Simchi, and the Zechus of a Refuah Shalema for Daniel Meir Ben Chana. We hope that all the neshamas have an aliyah, all the families in Nechama, and all the cholim have a refuah, together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. But with that, let us begin. So we have an exciting, beautiful daf ahead of us today. So we are picking up, we left off, actually today's daf is Chav Ches 28, and we left off on Chav Zayin Amud Beis 27b, 2 lines up from the bottom. V'igidarimash, thank you so much. Thank you.
It is strong.
It's strong, incredible, perfect. No one should be choshim. Yeah, this is instant, just like the rest of you. It's, imo anochi b'tzara. Or imchem anochi b'tzara, I should say. Thank you, Maish. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Maish, thank you. So we left off, 2 lines are from the bottom. Ika de Amri. So there are those who say, remember again, we're trying to figure out the circumstances under which that halacha l'maisa a zara, what type of avoda is a zar, a non-Kohen, is there liability for? So the Gemara says, Ikadamri, others explain, Maskiv Rabbi Zera, v'chiyesh lecha avoda sheyesh achareha avoda psula b'zar. So we'll say, according to this approach, what the Gemara is saying is as follows. Rabbi Zera raises a question. He says, is there such a thing as an avoda which has another avoda after it, which would still be problematic if performed by a zar? In other words, we'll say, in this model, what the Gemara is assuming is that halacha l'maaseh, the only type of avoda which cannot be done by a zar is what we call an avoda tama, a concluding avoda. But if you have an avoda that has another avoda after it, perhaps it should be permissible for that to be performed by a zar. So the Gemara says, that's true, top of Chav Ches, vari evarim upidarim. What about the burning of the fats and limbs? Because remember again, the burning of the fats and limbs is halacha l'maisa considered to be a concluding avoda. So concluding avoda. So the Gemara says, interesting, well, I should say differently. The Havamina in the Gemara is that Ivarim Pidarim is not a concluding avoda. But instead, Ivarim Pidarim, in fact, has an avoda after it. Now you'll say to yourself, what's the avoda that takes place after Ivarim Pidarim? Chumas Hadashan. Technically speaking, to which the Gemara says, no, Ivarim Pidarim is different, as we already mentioned in yesterday's daf, Sof Avoda Diyamamahi, because it is the concluding avoda of the day. I've heard Chumas Hadashan. So what about Chumas Hadashan? I'm going to both say the way Trumas Hadeshin works is, on one hand, you only remove a little bit of the ash, but then technically speaking, if the rest of the ash pile itself is too big, the Kohen will remove the rest of it. So the Gemara said, Tchilas avoda diyamamahi. Trumas Hadeshin is going to be different because it is considered to be the first avoda of the day. The Rabbi Yochanan said, this is just a repeat of what we saw in yesterday's daf. The Rabbi Yochanan, Kidesh yod of the Trumas Hadeshin, lemachar eno tzarech lekadesh, shekavar kidesh mitchilas avoda. Because after Rabbi Yochanan said that if a person sanctified the Yid Kiddush Raglayim for Trumas Hadeshin, even though again, technically speaking, Trumas Hadeshin can even be done before dawn, you need not sanctify your hands again, because Trumas Hadeshin is considered to be the beginning of daytime avoda. Ella kasha, so therefore we're left to the kasha, to which the Gemara says, itmar hachi itmar. Am Rabbi Yochanan, zar shesider shnei gizrei etzim chayiv. If a zar goes ahead, non-Kohen goes ahead and arranges the 2 pieces of wood on the top of the mizbeach, he will be chayiv. Why? Hoil va'avoda tamahi. Because at the end of the day, the arrangement of the 2 pieces of wood is what we call an avoda tama, a concluding avoda. But But if that's the case, that the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim is so chashuv, is so important because it is a concluding avoda, then why doesn't it require its own lottery, right? Why doesn't it require its own payis? So the Gemara says, "V'lo b'ay payis." Are you saying that the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim doesn't require a lottery? V'atanya, we learned Misha zacha b'trumas hadeshen yiskeh b'sidur Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. Yet the Rebbe said that there is a lottery. Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. You're right. It doesn't get it. Well, the Gemara says whoever wins the lottery for trumas hadeshen also gets the right to go ahead and put up the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. Halkin covers what the Gemara means to say. Yefaisula b'fnei atzma. Why don't we go ahead and make Shnei Gizrei Eitzim its own lottery? If it's so chashuv, in other words, if it's considered to be a concluding avoda, why not go ahead and give it its own lottery? To which the Gemara says, Kidar Minan. But we learned about this. Why? Because halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, at the end of the day, in order to make the pious, so this goes back to what we learned before. We spoke this a little bit yesterday as well. This is the whole progression of Trumas Hadeshen. Right? Remember again, at first, there was no lottery, no one wanted it. Then everybody was showing up, it got aggressive. They did a lottery. Then no one showed up. Why? Because again, if I'm going to win, maybe if I'm not going to win, it's not worth to wake up early. So what do? They attached a whole bunch of other avodos to Trumas Hadeshen to make that lottery more chashuv. So one of the things they bundled into the Trumas Hadeshen lottery ultimately was what? Was halacha l'maisa, the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. Good. L'meimra, da'avoda tama, v'zar chayiv ala misa, baye payis, ein zar chayiv ala misa, lo baye payis. So now the Gemara says, okay, so let me get the rules straight. So it sounds like what we're saying over here is, if a particular avoda is an avoda tama, remember again, which means a concluding avoda, ultimately again, an azar would be chayiv misa for performing it. That's the type of avoda which requires a lottery. So in other words, when do you draw lots for a particular avoda? If it's an avoda tama, concluding avoda, and a zar would be chayiv misa if he were to do it. To which the Gemara says, Ein zar chayiv ala misa, but halacha l'maisa, if it's a particular avoda for which a zar would not be chayiv misa, lo ba'e payis, you don't draw a lottery for that. To which the Gemara says, is that true? B'hari shchita. What about shchita? Well, so remember again, the second lottery we draw is who's going to get to shecht the tamid. Now remember again, shchita is kshera bizar. Right? Shchita is kshera bizar, halach l'maisa. So and yet again we draw a lottery. We draw a lottery for shchita, to which the Gemara says, shani shchita, the tchilas avoda diyamamahi. Shchita is different. Why? Because shchita is considered to be the first avoda of the day. So we'll say, so remember again, that endows it with a particular level of chashivas. L'meimra, da avoda tama baye payis, avoda sheish achara avoda lo baye payis. So we'll say, telling me then that it's only an avoda tama, concluding avoda, that requires a lottery, but an avoda that has another avoda after it doesn't require a lottery. Is that true? What about Varim Pedarim? What about the burning of the fats and limbs? Which avoda says not the Gemara's Havamina is, that's not a concluding avoda, that has another avoda after it. Which avoda does it have after it? Avoda say, which avoda? Shetrumas Hadeshen. To which, and yet again, so to which the Gemara says, and yet Varim Pedarim is part of a lottery. To which the Gemara says, no, Varim Pedarim is different. Sof avoda diyamamahi. It is considered to be the concluding avoda of the daytime. So the Gemara says, Trumas Hadeshen. Mishra say, what about Trumas Hadeshen? So the Gemara says, Mishra Maisa Shahaya. So let's remember again, Trumas Hadeshen requires a lottery because of, as we spoke about beforehand, because of the aggressive Kohanic behavior. Amar Zutre Teim Rav Ashi, Af Anan Nami Tanina. We also learned this as well. Amar Lehem Hamuna. So the individual is in charge of the Kohanim, says to the Kohanim, Su'u Ura'u Im Higiyaz Mana Shchita. He goes and he tells them, see if the time for the shechita has arrived already. V'ilu zman sidr gizre itzim lo katani. And therefore, both say, yet we see that he does not say to them, see if it's time ultimately again for the shnei gizre itzim, which both say looping back a little bit. So this seems to indicate to us that what? The shnei gizre itzim can be placed on the mizbech even when? Even at night. To which the Gemara says, no, same answer as we gave in the last version of this exchange. Hach de lesle takanto katani, hach de isle takanto lo katani. To which the Gemara says, no, it's not true. Shnei gizra itzim must be done by day as well. The difference, just as we spoke about in yesterday's daf, if you inadvertently go ahead and place the shnei gizra itzim at night, can you rectify that situation? And the answer is, yes. All you need to do is what? remove them, and put them back. Masha'inkin, if you shecht the tamid before daybreak, can you rectify that situation? No, I mean, you could rectify it in that you're going to bring another carbon tamid, but Lamai say you cannot rectify the carbon you brought, and that carbon is going to have to be taken out to the Beis HaSheifa. So both say, so the halacha l'maisa that we gleaned from this sugya ultimately again is the halacha l'maisa that we saw in yesterday's daf. Remember, today what we just saw on this first part of Amud Aleph was just an Ikeda Amri, an alternate version of the previous exchange. Both say this brings the parak to a conclusion. Hajjun Allah Barishon. Both say Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Says the Gemara. So both say brand new parak, incredible new parak. Amar Amuna. So we'll say, let's begin. So we'll say, so now we begin to get into a little bit more of the kishkas of the Yom Kippur. Saeed, good morning. Good morning. Took a lot of courage to come up here, you know. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. I should have asked for Mashiach. Who knows what would have happened? Saeed, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so I'll say, so now we get into a little bit more of the discussion regarding Yom Kippur. So it says the Mishnah as follows: Amar lahem hamamuna. So we'll say now we're going back. The mamuna is the individual in charge of the karban. And I want to point out, as we've seen through much of this Masechta so far, a lot of the things that the Mishnah is kind of portraying as occurring on Yom Kippur are the same things that occur each and every day. So one example of this is this particular piece of the Mishnah over here. The Gemara is framing it in the context of the Avodah of Yom Kippur, but as we're going to see, it's the same thing each and every morning. So Amalev HaMamuna. So the Mamuna, the individual in charge of the Kohanim. So Rashi points out that this is the Skan, which is interesting. So this is actually subject to some dispute. So is this the Skan Kohen Gadol, or is this just any Kohen whose particular responsibility was to go ahead and begin the morning service? Okay, but we'll go with Rashi. Skan Kohen Gadol. Skan Kohen Gadol says, Tsu'u uru'u. So we'll say also, interestingly enough, the version of the Mishnah over here is Amr Lahem. Well, good. We'll just Amr Lahem. So the Skan Kohen Gadol says to the Kohanim, Tsu'u uru'u im giaz man hashchita. Ultimately, go out and see if the time for the shchita has arrived. Now, we'll say, what's the time of the shchita? Look at Rashi. Zman shchita. Shchita satami klomer mher ha-mizrach shachita psula balayla. Now, we'll remember again. So this is the shchita of the carbon tamid. When can you begin to offer up the carbon tamid? As of alos. As of daybreak. So the mamuna, right? So the Skan says, the mamuna, the one appointed one says, go and look if the time for the shchita of the tamid has arrived. So the Gemara says, So we'll say ultimately, if the dawn has arrived, so the individual, the lookout, goes out to see, says barakai. Rashi says over here, barakai. Lashon Sohar, Kimo Lemana Yoslam Barak. So we'll say Barakai means light. Light. Indeed, it has become light. Masya ben Shmuel Omer, Heyer Pnei Kol HaMizrach Ad Shebechevron. So we'll say, interestingly enough, we're going to see how to read this phrase in the Gemara. But Masya ben Shmuel has a little bit of a different version. In his version, he says, Omer Heyer Pnei HaMizrach Ad Shebechevron is the entire horizon light up until Chevron, V'hu Omer Hein. And he says yes. So we'll say, interestingly enough, we'll have to see exactly who's saying what, but Masya ben Shmuel requires a more involved exchange. See, according to the Tanakama says, the Skan says to someone, one of the Kohanim, has the time for the Shechita arrived yet? The Kohen goes up to the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, and he says, Barakai, it's light. According to Masya ben Charash, there's a bit more of an exchange. So same first part, right? The Skan says to the Kohen, go and see if it's light, can we do the Shechita? And we'll see exactly the nature of this exchange, but it's not just simply a statement of it's light, it's so light I could see until Chevron. We'll see why they need that. Why is this necessary? So we'll say, so in other words, in a general sense, the Gemara is asking, why do you have to go up to the rooftop and see if the dawn has dawned? In other words, just look up at the sky. Why do you need a whole process? Go up to the rooftop until Chevron, not until Chevron. Why do you need this? So we'll say, this is incredible. So the Gemara says, Shepam achas ala ma'ar halavana v'dimu sheheir mizrach V'shachatu es hatamid b'otzia lebeis hasreifa. Because we'll say one time it happened that people got confused. And in fact, interestingly enough, they confused the moonlight with the sunlight. So we'll discuss exactly how this happened. But the idea was, it was still nighttime. And they saw moonlight, they thought it was sunlight, and they ordered the shechita of the tamid. And in fact, again, what happens if you shecht the tamid before daybreak? It's possible. It's possible. They had to take the tamid out to the Beis HaShrefa. They had to go ahead and burn it. So as a result of that, they instituted a new process of, we'll call it dawn verification. Now it's interesting, by the way. How many times does it sound like it happened? Once. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting that sometimes in life, we make a mistake and we say, okay, it was just a mistake. It happened once, and we don't feel any need to pivot in our lives to prevent that mistake from occurring again. But in fact, what you see is the wisdom of Chazal is once a mistake occurs once, that means it could occur. So pivot then, right? Go ahead and readjust. Don't wait for the mistake to happen a second time. Once it happened, it shows you that that's a possibility. It may very well be an aberration. But lamaisa, once you know it can occur, so plan for it, pivot, and readjust so that it doesn't occur again. So that leads to the process, and that's Mishnah is essentially outlining over here, dawn verification. Why can't you just go ahead and use just, an ocular verification? It's light, they need a dawn verification process because one time they got confused. One time in life you make a mistake, pivot, readjust so that it doesn't happen again. Incredible musar. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, after this, Horidu Kohen Gadol beis hatvila, they took the Kohen Gadol for the merger. So we'll say, in other words, once the dawn has arrived, the Kohen Gadol then gets ready for the day's avoda. Again, this is on Yom Kippur now. So on Yom Kippur, once the dawn has arrived, the beginning of avoda begins. The Kohen Gadol goes down to the mikvah, ultimately again to be tovel, to immerse. Now it's interesting, of course. We'll get into this. The lashon of the Kohen Gadol is horidu. They take him down to the mikvah. So we learned, where was the mikvah? It was on the rooftop. Right? This was a rooftop mikvah. So we'll discuss why the Mishnah uses the lashon of horidu, that they took him down, when in fact, really the mikvah is on an upper story. The Gemara says, klal hayu b'mikdash. There was a general klal in the Beis HaMikdash, and that was, kol ha-meisech es raglov ta'on tevila. If you go ahead and you defecate, you have to go to the mikvah. V'chol ha-matil mayim, but if all you go ahead and do is urinate, then ta'on kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. Then you need sanctification or washing of the hands and feet. So we'll say interesting halacha. Again, we'll get into these halachas in the Gemara. But we'll say, but the point of this Mishnah is our principle of dawn verification to begin the avoda of the day. We'll say Amud Beis. I just want to give you the incredible Gemara. Absolutely incredible and overwhelming Gemara ahead of us. Says the Gemara. Tanya, Rabbi Shmuel Omer. So we'll say, now what we're going to see is as follows. There is an ongoing machlokes as to the verbiage that was used when they would do the dawn verification. But what you're going to see, by the way, is that embedded in the verbiage machlokes was also different degrees of dawn. There's a little bit of a machlokes as to how light, how much dawn do you need in order to begin the avoda of the tamid. And that machlokes is going to come out though. So Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Barak Barakai. Rabbi Shmuel said, you need Barak Barakai. Barakai is not enough. Barak Barakai. Now, if you look at Rashi says Allah Barak. So Rashi doesn't comment here yet. Rabbi Akiva says Allah Barakai. The Barakai, the dawn has arisen. So Rashi says Allah Barakai. Heir Yosemi Barak. So we'll say, is you're going to see each of these opinions are essentially expressing a little bit of a later dawn. A little bit of a, say, is that yours right over here on this table? It might be. Allah Barakai. So ultimately, we'll say, so they're each going through a different stage of dawn. So the Gemara says, Nechumya ben Avkashion Omer Af Barakai bechevron. It is even dawn in Hebron. So we'll say, so again, Rashi points out over here, Allah Barakai, Heir Yosemi Barak. So each of them are describing a little bit of a later stage in the dawn. Masya ben Shmuel Omer, so let's listen to this. So Masya ben Shmuel says as follows, Hamamun ala payasos, Omer Heir Pnei Kol HaMizrach. So Nasi ben Shmuel says, the individual Kohen who's in charge of the lotteries, he would say, "Hey Omer, Heyer Pnei Kol HaMizrach Ad Shebechevron." He would say the entire horizon has dawned up until Chevron. Up until Chevron. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, Heyer Pnei Kol HaMizrach Ad Bechevron. The entire eastern horizon has dawned up until Chevron. The Yatsu Kala'am Ish Lamlachto. And at that point in the day, everyone went out to work. Now, both say that phrase, if everyone went out to work, is a reference to not Kohanim, to people in general. The Gemara says, 1 second, Ihachi Naga Leituva. If that's the case, then that must be a much later time in the morning, because they will say workers don't go out to work until when? Until there's real light. Until there's real light. So if you're describing, again, if Heyer Kol Pnei HaMizrach Ad Shebechevron, V'yatzu Kol Ha'am Ish Ish L'malachto, then that's a much later stage in the dawn. To which the Gemara says, Yachin Agalei Tuva. To which the Gemara says, no. Liskar Paul and Kamrinan. So we'll say what that means is, no. The workers wouldn't go out to work. But if you were an employer and you were looking for laborers, you would go out that early in the morning to find your laborers. Amarav Safra. So we'll say, so again, just different wordings for what they would say in the Mikdash. But again, to point out, it's not just a machlokes in verbiage. As you go down the list, they're each a little bit later in the dawn process. It's interesting. The Gemara doesn't really quantify what that later stage is. It's just, I guess it was observable depending on how much of the dawn you saw against the horizon. Amarav Safra. They will say, this is incredible. Rav Safra says as follows: Tziluse da Avram, the tefillah of Avram Avinu, michi mishachri kosle. They will say, this is fascinating. So the tefillah of Avram Avinu. So Rashi says over here, Tziluse da Avram, tefillas ha'erev shalo. They will say, this is a reference to Mincha. This is a reference to Mincha, yet amazingly enough, the Gemara is referring to Mincha as the tefillah of Avraham Avinu. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But when can you begin to daven mincha? From the time that the walls begin to darken. So we'll say, Rashi points out, this is midday. This is midday, right? At midday already, there begins to be a shadow against the walls. Rashi says, "So Lucy Davram Tfilas Ershalo Michi Mishachli Kosli Chomos Haponos LaMizrach." So walls that faced eastward. Shalbinu me'anei tzachama Baba min HaMizrach Benotzetzes Alein Ubetchilas Sheva Shos. At the beginning of 7 hours, I remember again. At the beginning of 7 hours means what? Into the 6th hour. So if we go on our perfect day, sunrise at 6, sunset at 6. This is 12 noon. So at the beginning of the 6th hour, Shachama be'emtza rakia barosh kol adam, eino os amur ela tachtein mashchir. So we'll say already at 6 hours of the day, that's when there begins to be a shadow against the wall. So the Gemara essentially is saying you could begin to daven mincha from the 6th hour, which is into the 7th hour, from the 6th hour and on. Now we'll say, we'll pause here for just a moment. But it's interesting, of course, fascinating, that the Gemara is referring to Mincha as the tefillah of Avram Avinu. So what's the pshat? So we'll say, if you take a look on the right-hand, the margin, there's a commentary called the Tosfos Yishanim. So you see it there? Right in the margin? Tosfos Yishanim, Tzaluse Davram, Michi Meshachri Kosle, V'is V'im Tomar, Harmina Befarak Tfilas HaShachar, Yitzchak Tikein Tfilas Mincha Shnemar, V'yitzi Yitzchak Lasuach Basadeh. But that's the Tosfos Yishanim. Mincha is Yitzchak's tefillah. Shachris is Avram's tefillah. To which the Gemara says, Yeshlomar the achar shetikna Yitzchak haya omra gam Avram kach bir shavenu tam. To both say, interesting enough, the Tosfos Yishanim says, you're right. Yitzchak went ahead. Avram did Shachris. Yitzchak instituted Mincha. But here's what's amazing: after Yitzchak instituted Mincha, what happened? What happened? His father began to recite it as well. That's fine. Both what Rabbi say. Does it answer the kasha? No. In other words, it's very nice that Avram Avinu started davening mincha. That's beautiful. But lamaisa, why not refer to mincha as the tefillah of Yitzchak? So the Tosfos Yishanim goes on. He says, "Inami Omer Rebbe demikol makom haya omra Avram mitchila ela shelo asa klal lekol bnei beiso at shetikni Yitzchak tefillah." You're supposed to listen to this. We'll leave the last part for later. We'll say to which the second answer that Tosfos Yishanim says is Avram also davened mincha, but also davened mincha when? Before Yitzchak. Before Yitzchak. See, Rabosai, there is this school of thought in the Rishonim that all of the Avos davened all three tefillos. Rabosai, of course, you know, when we say that Avram davened Shachris, it's obviously not our Shachris. But what it means is, Avram was the first one to really daven Bikvios in the morning. It's interesting that Tosos Yishanim posits. Avram Avinu davened Bikvios, Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. And Yitzchak Avinu daven b'kviyos, Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. And Yaakov Avinu also daven b'kviyos in a set way, Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. So why is Avram known for Shachris, Yitzchak for Mincha, Yaakov for Ma'ariv? Because also remember again, the dynamic of the Avos is reflected in those respective tefillos. Avram Avinu was the one who brought the dawn of monotheism to the world. Right? Avram Avinu was the one who introduced the Ribono Shel Olam to the world. It was the dawn of HaKadosh Baruch Hu under Avram Avinu. Yitzchak, so let me go out of order. You'll see I'll go out of order in just a moment. Yaakov is most associated with Ma'ariv. Why? Ma'ariv is davened at night. Nighttime represents difficulty, adversity, tragedy. This was the nature of Yaakov Avinu's life. Yaakov was the one who taught us that no matter what goes wrong in life, you have to maintain your allegiance and fidelity and connection to the Ribono Shel Olam. Yaakov's life was a big Ma'ariv, was a big Laila, was a big night. So many tzaras. Yet, his commitment to the Ribono Shel Olam never wavered. His relationship remained strong. That was Yaakov. We'll say, what was Yitzchak's role? So Yitzchak in general is the most fascinating of the Avos. Why? Because we know the least about him. We know the least about Yitzchak, right? The only thing we know about Yitzchak, amazingly enough, and there's nothing new about Yitzchak. The only events of Yitzchak's life are a repeat of things that happened to Avram Avinu, right? So remember again, there's the Akedah, which is the shared experience between Avram and Yitzchak. Then what else do we know about Yitzchak? Yitzchak dug wells, Avram dug wells, Yitzchak relocated because of famine, Avram Avinu relocated because of famine. We'll say, what was Yitzchak? Yitzchak was the mincha. Yitzchak was the solidifier. Right? Avram Avinu went ahead and built. Yaakov Avinu continued to build on that. Yitzchak was the one who solidified the foundation of his father so that his son Yaakov could continue to build. Yitzchak is the bridge. So Rabbi say what's coming out of the Gemara, what Chazal are hinting to us in a fascinatingly nuanced way, is that all of the Avos daven all of the tefillos. They just all related to different tefillos and different. For Avram Avinu, Avram Shachris spoke to him most because that was reflective of the dynamic of his life. He lived in the dawn of an exciting new era of the introduction of the Ribono Shel Olam to the entire world. Yaakov Avinu related most to Ma'ariv because he had so many tzaras, so much adversity in his life, yet still maintained the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Yitzchak was the mincha. We'll say mincha, the midday tefillah, the great unifier, the one that brings Shachris and Ma'ariv together. So amazingly enough, Chazal hint to this by calling mincha over here Tzaluse Davram. Just so you shouldn't think of it. We often think Avram daven in the morning, just the morning. Yitzchak daven in the afternoon. Yaakov Avinu daven in the evening. So we'll say, so again, two approaches in Tosas Yishanim. Approach number one is that Einachinami, after Yitzchak instituted mincha, so Avram Avinu began to daven it as well, which Rabbi also teaches us an incredible lesson, which is Eizu Chacham Halomed Mikal Adam. As parents, we often understand that it is our obligation to mechanech our children, but we also know, every attentive parent knows there is so much you can learn from your kids. So much you could learn, especially when they're young. As they get older, they become a bit more foolish. But until they become actual adults. But lamaisa, especially when they're young, right? Mamish also, I always find that small children can be the greatest rebbeim. Because small children remind us about simchas achayim, right? They remind you just how to be happy. Just how to be happy. And how to be happy, how to be low maintenance happy. Right, the younger they are, the simpler they are. It's an incredible musar. So what's beautiful over here is that the great Avram Avinu learns from his Yitzchak. Right, Yitzchak institutes mincha, and Avram could have said, "Okay, that's nice. That's good for you." But Avram says, "You know what? That's incredible. That's beautiful. I'm going to start to do that as well." So Eizu Chacham Alo Mikol Adam. We have to be receptive to learning from our children as well. And lesson number 2, of course, is the idea that each of the avos really identified with a different tefillah, reflective of their own lives, which I both say is so beautiful for us as well, because it tells us each of us also connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in different ways at different times in life. Sometimes it's a Shachris connection, sometimes it's a Mincha connection, and sometimes it's a Ma'ariv connection. In any event, the Gemara goes weiter. So I both say the point of why the Gemara is mentioning this over here is that you could begin to go ahead and daven Mincha at 6 hours of the day. So this is interesting about it. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef, Anon me Avram mekum v'nigmar. So Rabbi Yosef says, come on, we can't learn from Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was Zoris. Rashi says over here, Basa lelamed. Leo's using Kavram Avinu. Kavram, you want us to be Zoris, to be alacritus, like Avram Avinu? Impossible. I was Avram Avinu. He davened at 6 hours a day. We can't be so Zoris. To which the Gemara says, why not? Amar Rava, Tana Gamar me Avram, v'anan lo Gamina minei. The Tana, right, the Gemara learns much from Avram Avinu, and you think we should learn from him. We'll say, what do we learn from Avram Avinu? This is incredible. We'll say, we learn the Iker concept of Zrizos from Avram Avinu. After all, the Torah says, Desanya, we're learning a Braisa, Ubayoma Shmini Yimol Basar Arlaso. So we'll say, the halacha is, Torah tells us, that on the eighth day, we give a bris milah. Now, both say, now what do we learn from that pasuk? Malamed shekol hayom kasher lemila. Both say you're allowed to do bris milah the entire eighth day. Ela shazrizin makdimin lemitzvus. But both say we try to be zaris, right? Zrizin makdimin lemitzvus. Those who are alacritus run to go ahead and perform mitzvus, and therefore we perform the milah in the morning when possible. Rabbi say, where do we learn the concept of zrizos from? Shne'emar vayashkim Avraham baboker vayachavosh. As well as the pasuk says by the Akedah, Avraham Avinu got up early in the morning and saddled his own donkey. Now, what I want to point out from this is something very interesting. So, first of all, the concept of zrizos is learned out from Avraham Avinu that he got up. Remember again, all the Ribbon Shalom tells him is go and offer Yitzchak. Right? Avraham Avinu could have said, you know what, I'm going to be well rested for the journey ahead. I'm going to sleep a little bit later. But that's not what happens. Vayashkim Avram baboker. Avram gets up early in the morning and goes in and gets ready for the Akedah. They both say that is the source, the biblical source for the concept of Zrizos. I want to point something else also, which is very interesting. That pasuk is also the source for something else. Because they both say, not only does the pasuk say Vayashkim, but it also says what? He saddled his donkey. So Rashi HaKadosh is bothered by this. Why? Avraham Avinu doesn't need to saddle his own donkey. Why not? He's got a guy, right? He's got a guy. Jews have always had guys for stuff, right? I've got a guy for saddling my donkey. But yet he did it himself for both sides. So the Rashi says, you see from here what? You see from here, Ha'ava makalkel es ashura. Right? That love disrupts the natural order of things. So whether that's a reference to love for Yitzchak, or love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or love for both, Ava makalkel es ashura. Love makes you do crazy things. So Avraham Avinu, that love for Yitzchak, that love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, caused him to saddle his donkey. Both say we see another example of this, a reverse example of what? So the pasuk says, by Bilam, Vayashkim Bilam also got up early in the morning to go and curse Klal Yisrael. And Rashi over there says, Mikan, what do you see from here? Hasina makalkel es ashura. Right? That sinna, hatred, goes ahead and disrupts the natural order of things. So I've been thinking a lot about this over like the last year. I think from the pandemic, what we've also learned is something else, a third concept of hapachad makalkel es ashura. Fear upsets the natural order of things as well. Right? We've seen this in so many ways over the course of the pandemic, how fear kind of often puts rational thought on the side. Fear often goes ahead and just upsets the natural order of things, and we see this, right? To both say, because we've been trying to strike this balance in so many different ways between, again, responsible behavior, over the top behavior. And again, it's different, but you see that sometimes there's so much irrationality that comes to certain things. It's an incredible thing. So Avram teaches us, again, Ava makalkel es ashura, Bilam teaches us, Sina makalkel es ashura, and we've seen with our own eyes that hapachad, fear, is makalkel es ashura as well, just upsets the natural order, the natural balance of things. Incredible. In any event, the Gemara says, so we learn the concept of zrizos from Avraham Avinu. Ela Amarava, so we'll say, Ela Amarava, Rabbi Yosef, Ela Amarava, Rabbi Yosef, Haka Kashile. This is what bothered Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yosef said, just want to point out, the real kasha over here was not a din in Zrizus. It was not a din in Avram Avinu. The kasha over here was, the Gemara seems to indicate to us that you could daven mincha as of what time? As of what time? Noon. 6 hours into the day. The Gemara says 1 second. So the Gemara says, Disnan, chal arvei psachim lios be'erev Shabbos. Oh, little chazara. When Erev Pesach falls out on Erev Shabbos, nishchat, so nishchat b'sheishu mechza, the kari b'shevo mechza. So the Gemara says, when can you offer up the carbon tamid? The tamid shavin arba'i. Remember again, we back it up. So when can you offer it up? As of 6.5 hours into the day. Why do you have to wait until 6.5? After all, again, if we just said that you could daven mincha as of 6 hours into the day, then you should be able to offer up the carbon mincha when? When? 6 hours into the day. So you should be able to go ahead and offer it up when the walls begin to darken, which is 6 hours. Now understand, on an Erev Shabbos, that's Erev Pesach, that extra half hour is incredibly important. If we could back up the Talmud even more to 6 hours into the day, why do you have to wait till 6.5? To which the Gemara says, "My kushya, the dilmod kosle beis hamikdash b'sheishu mechza meshachri, or mishum delo muchni, mishum delo mechabni tuva." So we'll say maybe it's different because remember again the way that the halacha read is that you could begin to go ahead and daven mincha when from the time that the walls begin to darken, which means that there's a shadow against the walls. So maybe the walls of the Beis Hamikdash did not begin to darken until when? Until 6.5 hours into the day. So we'll say it's a fascinating havamina. The Gemara is suggesting maybe it's actually not like a time issue as much as it is, we'll call it like a, what's the right way to term this? Like a solar occurrence issue. In other words, that it's literally when the walls begin to darken. Now we know, Rashi points out, the walls of the Beis HaMikdash were tapered. So maybe the walls of the Beis HaMikdash did not actually begin to darken until 6.5 hours into the day. To which the Gemara says, Inami, shiny davram, the itstagninus gidola haisa balibo. Also, maybe Avram Avinu was different. Because Avram Avinu was well versed in the Atstagninos literally means astrology. But what it means, the Gemara is using it over here is to mean is maybe Avram Avinu was very well versed, again in general, in the luminaries, the sun, the moon, the stars. So he was able to see when exactly was 6 hours into the day. We're not as well versed. So the problem is if we go with six and we're wrong, then what? It's too early. We may end up going ahead and offering up the Talmud a bit too early. So therefore, again, we wait till 6.5. This way, again, we're good to go. Okay. Inami mishum dezakin v'yoshev b'yeshiva. Rabbi said this is an incredible Gemara. Or the other possibilities, Avram Avinu was different. Why? Because he was zakin and yoshev b'yeshiva. Now, Rabbi said, now let's talk about this in just a moment. So first of all, Rashi points out over here, it's stagninos. Rashi's on both sides of this page, by the way. So it's Rashi on the right. It's stagninos lios baki bahalichos hamazalos utrilos hashos. So again, the possibility is that Avram Avinu was just so much more well versed in the sun, the moon, the stars, the astrology, the solar system. So again, he was able to know exactly when the sun was at 6 hours. But we're not as proficient, so we go at 6.5. And I will say the other possibility is the Gemara says Avram Avinu was a zakin, the Yoshe b'yeshiva hava. And I will say, interestingly enough, the zakin over here that the Gemara is using is an acronym for Zeh Shekana Chachma. Avram Avinu was very wise. He was very wise, and he was Yoshev b'yeshiva hava. And I will say, now what does this mean, Yoshev b'yeshiva? Right? So the way the Gemara is using this term is really quite fascinating. Yoshev b'yeshiva, Rabosai, means that he made. Now remember, yeshiva literally means what? Literally, to sit. So we're going to see the context in which the Gemara is going to use the concept of yeshiva over here, literally as a place of study. But the place of study is there to provide for a concentrated delving into ruchnius. So yeshiva means you make the pursuit of ruchnius a kavua, a fixed part of your life. So it's almost supposed to say the way you have to read it is as follows. So the Inai Mishum Dezakin, the Yoshe b'yeshiva. Avram Avinu was a zakin. He was a zakin. He was Zeh Shekana Chachma. He was very wise. Why was he wise? Because the Yoshe b'yeshiva hava. And I will say, Yoshe b'yeshiva meaning he made the pursuit of spirituality a fixed practice. See, I will say what the Gemara is going to highlight over here is something dramatically amazing, which is there are two ways that one could pursue ruchnius. A person could pursue ruchnius recreationally or episodically, which means again, when I have time, I do it. When I have time, I do it. So which we'll say is definitely better than nothing. When I have time, I do it. When it's convenient, I do it. I'll pursue ruchnius. That's different than a person who's Yosef b'yeshiva. We'll say Yosef b'yeshiva means I make the pursuit of ruchnius a fixed part of my life. It is fixed. It's there. I don't miss it. I show up. Obviously everybody has circumstances that are beyond their ability. But again, that's what it means to be Yosef b'yeshiva. I make the pursuit of ruchnius a fixed part of my life. Do you know what happens when you make the pursuit of ruchnius a fixed part of your life? Do you know what happens when you're Yosef b'yeshiva? That's when you become a zaken. That's when you become a person zeshek kana chachma. Dam Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina. Both say it's a beautiful Gemara. In all the days of our forefathers, all the days of our forefathers, lo parsha yeshiva mehem. There was always a yeshiva. And I will say here the Gemara is using this in a very literal sense as well. That there was always a yeshiva. There was always a house of study by our forefathers. But Mitzrayim yeshiva. When we were in Egypt, there was a yeshiva. Shnei Amar lech v'asafte ziknei Yisrael. So we'll say again the fact that there are ziknei Yisrael, zakin. Remember the Gemara is using the word zakin. Ultimately, again, to refer to Zesha Kana Chachma. What it means, therefore, that there was Zakenim, there was Yeshiva, which means there was a fixed pursuit of spirituality. There were individuals who were focused on acquiring a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, acquiring personalistic growth in a fixed, kavua manner. Asay Torascha Keva. Both sides. It's not a chiddush. It's anything you want to be successful in life, you have to make a kaviyas in it. Right? Again, if you want to be a star basketball player and you practice for 7 minutes one day, 2.5 hours a different day, 22 minutes a different day, it's not going to work. There has to be a kaviyas. So ruchnius is no different. Ruchnius is no different than anything else in life. You want to be a good doctor, you want to be a good lawyer, you want to be a good accountant, there needs to be a kaviyas. So that's what it means. Wherever we went, there was a yeshiva. Wherever we went, there were individuals who were dedicated and made a kvios, made a fixed practice of working on their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, spiritual development. When we were in Egypt, there was ziknei. Bamidbar yeshivim shneimar asvali shivim ish miziknei Yisrael. When we were in the Midbar, again the Torah says, asvali shivim shiziknei. Go ahead and Moshe Rabbeinu says, go ahead and assemble for me 70 men from amongst the ziknei Yisrael. Aram Avinu. Zakin v'yoshe b'yeshiva haya. Avraham Avinu was a zakin sitting in yeshiva. Shnei Amar v'Avraham zakin ba'yomim. So we'll say, so once again, the Torah doesn't need to tell us that people become old. We all become old. We know that. I mean, how we should be zocher to become old. But rather, when the Torah goes out and discusses a zaken, it's zeh shekana chachma. And how do you have a zeh shekana chachma? Yosef b'yeshiva. If you make the pursuit of ruchnius a fixed practice in your life. Yitzchak Avinu zaken v'yosef b'yeshiva. Yitzchak Avinu, I will say, by the way, that's how you know that. That's what yeshiva means. Yeshiva can't mean like what we think of a yeshiva, like a beis medrash, because who's in the beis medrash of Avraham Avinu? Who's there? Avram, maybe Shem Be'ever, maybe Eliezer. It's not much of a chevra. I mean, they're wonderful chevra, don't get me wrong. I'm saying, but it's not much of a, as they say, it's not much of a matzuv, right? As they like to say. So, again, so the yeshiva in this context means the pursuit of ruchnius as a fixed practice. Yitzchak Avinu has yeshiva, Shneimar, Vayiki Zakin Yitzchak. Yaakov Avinu Zakin Yoshev Yeshiva, Haya Shneimar, Ve'ene Yisrael Kavdu Mizoken. Eliezer Eved Avram Zakin V'Yoshev Yeshiva Shneimar V'Yomer Avram El Abdo Zekan Beiso Hamosha B'Chol Asher Lo. I'm Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi said, what does it mean that Eliezer was Moshel, ruled over everything that belonged to his master? I'm Rabbi Lazar. Shemosha B'Toras Rabbi. Rabbi, remember again, this is especially true before the birth of Yitzchak. Eliezer was in charge. Eliezer was the one who ruled over the ruchnius, so to speak, of Avram. He was the one who doled out the Torah of his master. Who Damesek Eliezer, Amr Belazar, Shedola Umashko Mitorasa Sharabolachen. This is beautiful. Eliezer was the chassid of Avraham Avinu. And what did the chassid do? He took the Torah of his rabbi, took the Torah of Avraham Avinu, and he went ahead and he shared it with others. That's what it means. Dola Amashko. He would draw it out and go ahead and give it to others. So beautiful. Rabbi says, so again, you see what the Gemara is highlighting. Rabbi says, it's such a powerful yisod. If I want to be excellent in my Torah, if I want to be excellent in my ruchnios, if I want to be a zakin, a zeh shekana chachma, It requires yeshiva. I have to sit in yeshiva if I want to be a zaken. Sitting in yeshiva it's nice to sit in a beis medrash. That's incredible, especially if a person has that opportunity to surround myself in that atmosphere. Like we, Baruch Hashem, have the schos every single day to be in the beis medrash together, but it also means more on a personal level to make the pursuit of ruchnius something that is done bikvios, not episodic, not recreationally, but something that happens in a fixed kavua fashion, day in and day out. But now I think Gemara starts talking about Avram Avinu. It says Avram Rabbi is incredible Gemara. Kim Avram Avinu kala Torah kula. Avram Avinu fulfilled the entire Torah. Shnei Emar. Ekev asher shama Avraham bikoli. Since Avram Avinu went ahead and Ekev, since Avram Avinu listened to my voice. Amar le Rav Sim, and I will say the idea of your Shema, but since Avram Avinu listened to bikoli, my voice, what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's voice? The Gemara is understanding that the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kol Torah Kula. So Avram Avinu kept the entire Torah. I know what you're thinking to yourself. Really kept the entire Torah? Then what? Why didn't he do bris milah until HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded him to do so? Says a whole Torah on that gadol hamitzvah ba'oseh mishe'enu mitzvah ba'oseh, that it is a greater schos to perform a mitzvah which you are commanded for than to perform something you're not commanded for. I will say the logic behind that is people like doing altruistic things, right? So to do something I'm not commanded to do, we are often drawn to that. But to do something you're commanded to do, it sounds interesting, sometimes that's much more difficult. Avram Avinu knew that there was a mitzvah bris milah, but he wanted to be commanded first. In any event, the Gemara says over here that Ekev asher shama Avraham bikoli, since Avram listened to my voice, the Gemara understands that to be a reference to Kol Torah Kula. Why do you say that refers to Kol Torah Kula? Maybe it just refers to Shem Mitzvos B'nei Noach. Right? How do you know at first? To which the Gemara says, so, but one second, but there's bris milah. When Avram Avinu did bris milah, and bris milah is not part of Shem Mitzvos B'nei Noach. I be'ima Sheva Mitzvos Umilah. So fine, maybe Avram Avinu kept Shem Mitzvos B'nei Noach and bris milah. Amarle imkein mitzvosai v'sorosai lamali. So if that's the case, then why does the pasuk say that Avram Avinu, Hashem says Avram Avinu kept my mitzvos and my Torah? So the Gemara says, therefore, it teaches us that mitzvosai v'sorosai ekev asher shama Avraham mikoli. Since Avram Avinu went ahead and listened to my voice, v'yishmar mishmarti mitzvosai chukosai v'sorosai. From there, we learn that Avram Avinu kept the entire Torah. Now, both say, does it literally mean that Avram Avinu sat in a sukkah? He took lulav and esrog. So again, there are different ways of understanding this particular Gemara. But listen to this; it gets better. Amar Rabbi Tim Rav Ashi. Came Avram Avinu afilu erubei tavshilin. Avram Avinu even kept eruv tavshilin. Now it's Shnei Emar sorosai achas Torah shebichsav va'achas Torah shebal peh. He kept everything. I will say, not just Torah shebichsav, but also Torah shebal peh. So I will say, why eruv tavshilin? Right? You want to illustrate that Avram Avinu even kept Torah shebal peh. So if you look, we'll say once again at the Tosos Yishanim on the right hand column, this is great. Afilu eruv tavshilin lo yada Rebbe amai nakit hach mitzvah amai kila letvei mikulu. So Tosos Yishanim say, I have no idea why the Gemara chose this example. Why did the Gemara choose eruv tavshilin more than any other din d'Rabbanan? I'll point out to you there is an alternate version of this Gemara, and this is incredible. This is so exciting. Which is not just eruv tavshilin, has it as eruv tchumin. So we'll say if you hold it as eruv tchumin, it actually works a little bit better. Why? What does Avram Avinu? Because we'll say, what was Avram Avinu's life? It was traveling, right? Remember again, Avram Avinu was lech lecha, and to a certain degree, there is a little bit of a nomadic experience. Avram Avinu never builds a bayis, right? He never builds a home. It's a little bit of a nomadic experience. So eruv tchumin would make a bit more sense because Avram Avinu's life was about in the tchum, out of the tchum. But the Pashut Pshat in the Gemara over here is eruv tavshilin. So it could be the reason the Gemara chooses eruv tavshilin. I will say because when you think about like dinei d'Rabbanan, like eruv tavshilin is such a newer, quote unquote, a newer innovation we have in the Gemara. But even up to eruv tavshilin, so the Gemara is trying to give an example that Avram Avinu kept Torah shebichsav and Torah shebal peh, even to the smallest details of eruv tavshilin. I will say, but perhaps Chazal trying to teach us an incredible message here as well. What's unique about eruv tavshilin? But remember again, just for 5 seconds, maybe in 2 minutes. What does eruv tavshilin do? Remember again, when do you use eruv tavshilin? When you have Yom Tov going into Shabbos, right? And remember, the halacha is you can't cook on Yom Tiv for Shabbos, right? You could prepare on Yom Tiv for Yom Tiv, but you cannot prepare on Yom Tiv to Shabbos or on Yom Tiv to another day, Yom Tiv to Chol. So what do? You take an Erev Tavshilin. So we'll say, what's the Erev Tavshilin? It's not hocus pocus. So what happens? Suddenly you go ahead and you take a piece of gefilte fish and a matzah, and suddenly you could cook on Yom Tiv for Shabbos? No. Remember, what does Erev Tavshilin do? Erev, when you take the cooked food and the baked food on Erev Yom Tiv, that is the beginning of a process. That's the beginning of a process, the beginning of a cooking and baking process. When you continue to cook and bake on Yom Tiv, that is continued to be a continuation ultimately of what? Of the weekday process you started. So since you started the process on the weekday, you can go ahead and continue it on Yom Tiv as well, and therefore it's not considered to be a preparation on Yom Tiv for Shabbos. Instead, it's considered to be a continuation of a weekday process on Yom Tiv as well. You started the cooking then, and it's a continuation. So I will say, amazingly enough, what does Erev Tavshilin do? If you think about this in just a moment, Erev Tavshilin is the only mitzvah that links Chol, Yom Tiv, and Shabbos. It links all three states of being. Weekday existence, Yom Tiv existence, Shabbos. I will say those are three different things. Right? Remember again, Shabbos is Kedusha Somei Atzmo. Shabbos is a self-generated Kedusha. That we don't create that Kedusha. That Kedusha comes from the Ribono Shel Olam. Right? Yom Tiv, Rabbi say, is Mekadesh Yisrael V'Azmanim. We create that Kedusha. And Chol, what's Chol, Rabbi say? What's Chol? What's Chol? Right? Chol is whatever you make of it. Right? Chol is whatever you make of it. Chol is the tabla rasa, right? Chol is the blank slate. What was the gadlus of Avraham Avinu? The gadlus of Avraham Avinu is that he was able to take the Kedusha of Shabbos, the Kedusha of Yom Tiv, and he was able to bring it into the Chol as well. But said the gadlus of Avraham Avinu was that he was able to take the Kedusha, the innate Kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the generated Kedusha of Yom Tiv, and he was able to bring that into the Chol. That's Erev Tavshilin. To be able to take Chol, Yom Tiv, Shabbos, and bundle them all together into a consecrated existence. That is the pinnacle of human accomplishment. And I will say, it's amazing. It wasn't just Avraham Avinu. Remember, let's talk about Sarah for just a moment. Rashi HaKadosh says there were 3 miracles that happened in the tent of Sarah Imenu. And one of them was Ner Shabbos Dolekes Me Erev Shabbos Erev Shabbos. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, what's the meaning of that miracle? That the Shabbos candles remained lit? That Sarah Imenu was able to take the Kedusha of Shabbos with her into the week. See, Rabbi said the power of Avram and Sarah. It's easy to have holiness on Shabbos. And it's easy to have holiness on Yom Tiv. But the pinnacle of human accomplishment is when you could bring holiness into the Chol, when you could bring holiness into a regular weekday. Avraham Avinu, Sarah Imenu's candles remain lit from Erev Shabbos, which means it wasn't just Shabbos on Shabbos. The Kedusha of Shabbos permeated Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Avraham Avinu kept Erev Tavshilin, the ability to take the Kedusha of the Ribono Shel Olam, the Kedusha of oneself into the weekday. That's the pinnacle of human accomplishment. So obviously the Gemara is trying to illustrate that Avraham Avinu kept Kala Torah Kula, even Erev Tavshilin. But perhaps it's not an accident that Chazal choose Erev Tavshilin, because it is the only, it's the only mitzvah, you could tell me, you feel free to tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's the only mitzvah that bridges Chol, Shabbos, and Yom Tiv into one concurrent stream. Because the galus of Avraham Avinu was to bring all of the Kedusha in the world into Chol as well. Anyway, the Gemara goes on. So Master and Shmuel Omer, we'll say let's do one more line. So we'll say, this is the Sugi of Avraham Avinu. It brings to a close the Sugi of Avraham Avinu, which is really quite beautiful. So we'll say, back to the Mishnah now. So Masya ben Shmuel Omer, V'hu Omer Hein. So we'll say, Saman Amar Hein. So we'll say, remember again, if you go back to the Mishnah, so the wording of the Mishnah is a little bit strange, because it's not quite clear who exactly is saying what in the Mishnah. Remember again, in the Tanakhama's version, the Mamuna, who Rashi identified as the Skan, is telling someone, go up to the rooftop and see if the dawn has arrived. The guy goes up to the rooftop, one word, which was what? Brakai. That's it. Okay, so Machlok is Brakai, Allah Brakai. Good, leave that aside. Brakai. Masya ben Shmuel comes along and says, no. It was a much bigger discussion over here. Heyer Pnei Kol HaMizrach Ad Shebechevron, is the entire horizon light until Chevron? Vu Omer Hein, and he said yes. So now the Gemara says as follows. Now the Gemara says, Man Omer Hein. Who said yes? How do we assign the speaking parts over here? Ile Mahach Dekaya Igra. If you want to say it's the guy who's standing on the rooftop, So he says that the dawn has dawned until Hebron, and he also says yes. So the Gemara says that doesn't make sense. Hu chala b'hu mafasher. So this is an expression. He had the dream and he also interprets it. In other words, I will say that it wouldn't make sense for the guy who's standing on the roof to say, right, has the dawn dawned until Hebron? And then for him to answer his own question and say yes, right? Does the person who have the dream interpret the dream as well? Ibayis, and the other possibility is, hach de kai a'igra, amar ihu heyer pnei kol ha-mizrach. So we'll say the other possibility is the one who's standing on the rooftop says, he makes a declarative statement. The entire horizon, the entire eastern horizon has dawned. And the man standing on the ground, who's the man standing on the ground? That's the sgan, the mamuna. The mamuna says, that's a question. And the guy standing on the roof says yes. So we'll say, so possibility A is that again, the mamuna, the sgan says to the guy, go up to the rooftop. Guy goes on the rooftop, makes a declarative statement. The entire eastern horizon has become light. The individual, the mamuna standing on the ground says, until Hebron, it's a question. And the individual on the rooftop says yes. The other possibility is, so we'll say, other possibility is, no, it's actually referring to the guy standing on the ground. So watch this. Amar Ihu, here Pinekala Mizrach. So we'll listen to the second version. In the second version, same thing happens. The mamuna, the skan, says to someone, go up to the rooftop, see what's going on. The guy goes up to the rooftop. I will say, in the first version, it's the guy, I shouldn't say the guy, the kohen on the rooftop, who begins the dialogue. Right? In the first version, the kohen on the rooftop says, Heyer Pinekala Mizrach. Then the mamuna, who's on the ground, says, Ad Sheba Hebron, until Hebron. And then the guy on the rooftop says, Hey. That's dialogue number one. Dialogue number two looks a little bit different, or version number two says as follows. The conversation begins with the mamuna on the ground, and he says, Heyer Pnei Kol HaMizrach, it's a question. So the guy on the ground says to the guy on the rooftop, tell me, has the entire eastern area, has it become light? V'amar lei. And the coin on the rooftop says, Ad Sheba Hebron. Until Hebron. It's become light until Hebron. But Amrlei, and then the individual the Kohen who's standing on the ground, the Mamuna says, Haim, good. In this context, Haim means, yes, good. That's why we sent you up there, to go ahead and make sure that indeed it has become light ultimately again until Hebron. So we'll say, so just again, it's the same, the result is the same, right? The result ultimately, Masi ben Shmuel is saying it's not just enough for dawn to occur, but rather we need to see the dawn extended all the way until Hebron. Just a machlokes as to which speaking parts are assigned to. Okay, so we'll stop over here. We'll pick up at the 2 dots tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Hebron Zoom. Everyone have a wonderful day.